Welcome to Between Two Pastries. We do not have our fun clapping. Annie, you want to clap?
Audience.
Let's clap.
Hey,
There
yay.
we go.
Woo.
Yeah. So Annie and I are not together today. We are practicing the COVID standard of not just 6 feet away, but probably several miles away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So recording.
It sucks, but
It does. So today's sort of question that was posed by a listener wasn't necessarily a question as much as I think that they just kind of want to know what we sort of think about this sort of thing. But it was around the whole COVID experience and with having isolation and then with people who have eating disorders. And, probably really what are any suggestions that we may have for that, and what are kind of our thoughts around that. So I know Annie and I kind of wanted to also make mention about this whole COVID thing too, that we know that our subjects have been completely unrelated, and there's kind of a reason for that, just because we're kind of inundated right now with what's currently going on. It's kind of nice to offer people something else to listen to. But we also want to be sensitive that, we clearly understand that there is something worse going on out there than the issues that, or any of the subject matter that we're remotely discussing. And we are sensitive to that at the same time. So,
yeah. No, I think it doesn't matter if it's a pandemic, if it's a bad Friday night, a snowstorm, or whatever. Isolation is bound to occur in everyone's life, and when obviously we as humans are social creatures, isolation it doesn't necessarily feel good for majority of people. I mean, I know certain people, I've got my sister included, was like, she's been like dying for the day this would happen so she could just be a hermit crab. So
I know.
Yeah, so like I feel like there's some introverts in this world that are probably
Definitely
loving it, but for majority of people, isolation and just being at home can be really challenging. And this goes, and I don't want to say I told you so, but like, and I know you've been preaching this since I've known you as well, is just you have to learn to sit with yourself. It doesn't matter if and this goes, I don't know, I feel like I've brought this up on other podcasts, but like being able to sit with our emotions, whether you're happy, you're sad, you're angry, you advocate being present. And I just think people, being present, but also just, I'm bored and I'm sitting here and I'm staring at the wall. Well, good. Stare at the wall, because that's okay.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with,
right.
Yeah. We don't always have to be doing something. And it's really, really important to not be doing something.
Yeah. Agreed.
That's the whole point, like, and
but
it's,
I'm sorry, Annie, go ahead.
No, it's really interesting. As I'm out in the morning running and stuff, there's more people out and about, which I find, okay, kudos.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, this is weird, but everyone's being really pleasant.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you see what not, 12 hours of work a day does to you? Like kind of how your mood changes, and all of a sudden now being home and like that whole wish to, God, I'd really wish to be with my family and blah, blah, blah. And it's come true. And people are really struggling with it. And yeah, there's nothing to say that depression, anxiety, OCD for sure, eating disorders are all elevated right now, for sure.
And I think
but you got to learn to cope.
Exactly. That really is just the key, obviously, to anything that is always out of our control,
Right.
And that was kind of my point too. It's like you take away people's routines or their sense of potential, control over some things, but also even a sense of security, which has really kind of jostled a lot of people too. And it is bound to bring up, some of these unpleasant, emotions or insecurities or feelings
Right.
that we all struggle with, and that we all sometimes don't use good coping skills to deal with. So case in point with this particular listener, again, what about the eating disorder that might live alone and that has this opportunity? I mean, it could potentially throw somebody back into a really detrimental state. Or we could see this as an opportunity, should this individual, or anybody struggling with this, seek some support around this during this time. And I think that it offers part of with eating disorders in general is sometimes just not being able to ask for what they need.
Right.
I think that's kind of, part of that big part of sort of feeling pride around that, or feeling like they can't take up space. So why could they ask someone to hold space for them when they needed it? And I feel like situations like this, if you can find that courage and that self-love and self-compassion to say, I am enough, I am worthy, I deserve, and then we can open those doors then to, potential healing in that area. So by deciding, okay, who's going to be in my isolation tribe?
Right.
Who do I,
Yeah.
who can I call when I need, or who can I make sure that I'm reaching out to on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or, so it's you have to create kind of your own securities around that, and knowing kind of, who you are, what you need to kind of help you move through the discomfort.
Well, and it also has to come from your heart, from yourself.
Yep.
Like, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I don't want to isolate. That's not good. And, but I'll isolate. And, like where you're feeding into it. Like, it has to come from within. And really you have to find that self-motivation, because no one can do it for you.
Nope.
And here's the prime opportunity for things like eating disorders and all of that stuff to come out. And you have to be able to say, I'm not going to let that happen, to use what you've learned in recovery, or to use whatever it is that you've learned, from outpatient care or whatever, to be able to help you. And if even people with disordered eating or just general mental health conditions in general, they have to be able to say, wow, this is uprooting a lot of these feelings that I know I need to be able to sit with. But in the meantime, can I read? Can I write? Can I color? Whatever it might be, to be able to work through some of this stuff, because it does become really, really, really challenging. And the one thing this is kind of a little segue. One thing I've noticed that I find really, really fascinating is how many people have said to me, the hardest part about all of this is there's no end in sight. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
Life has no end in sight. Like, why is this any different than any other day?
Sure.
So your kids might be at home now. Oh, there's no end in sight. Well, they're still in school. It's just a new location. Oh, you're working from home. It's just a new location. Nothing is actually different outside of external things that we go through every day. Stopping for your coffee, going to a restaurant. And a lot of people are like, oh, there's no end in sight. When am I going to be able to go to work again, to go to the bar again, to go to this restaurant, to get a fish fry? And it's like, think about what you're saying. And I find it so fascinating how the number one anxiety provoker in all of this is there's no end in sight.
Sure.
And I guess that's, I don't know, for me, that's just like, who cares?
But when we live in a society,
do you need an end?
Sure, but when we live in a society that is always looking beyond the present, looking at the future, looking at the getting ahead, do you know what I'm saying?
The what ifs.
Or the what ifs, right? And instead of just being like, okay, I'm taking this moment by moment,
I mean, if you just stay in today,
right.
Yeah, you just stay in today's moment. Like, how's it any different? Why are we thinking of? I mean, outside of like maybe planning trips or something, and that's something that we do in the future, and that makes sense. Outside of putting that on hold, what the hell do you have to do in the future? Or to be thinking about when this ends? Who the hell cares? I mean, I care from a, healthcare standpoint or people living and dying standpoint, but I just find that very fascinating. But we can't let the future dictate our today mindset.
Right.
And our today choices.
That's ultimately, what we want. But I think there's so many people though that have, lost their job and probably have a family that are in some pretty scary situations that, they are
Yeah.
thinking like, oh goodness, when can I get back to some normalcy where I can support my family fully again? I mean, there's some real scary
Yes.
things there, but and what's the best thing that we can make out of this right now? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
what do we have and how can we make it really great? Like, okay, I'm with my family. How can I make this time really, really great? Or we at least have this going on. It's still taking a bad situation and trying to make it as good as possible because we're all in the same or similar situations.
Right. What I think the number was 33 million people
It's
are filed for
unbelievable.
unemployment.
It's unbelievable. It's
I mean,
unbelievable.
it is. It's not okay. But and again, it's not being insensitive as much as it's like a lot of people are in this same boat.
Right. Right.
And I guess I tend to try to think if that many people are in the same boat,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be supported through all of them.
Right.
So
And again, for an eating disorder where control is a really big issue though, how can they rein
yeah.
that in? And I think that, so I'm even thinking about with anybody with disordered eating or whatnot is, can you make a meal with somebody over Zoom or over FaceTime?
Yeah.
Where, okay, we're making this meal together. We're actually, I'm sitting with this person so this person can be present with me while I work through my anxieties, maybe around eating in front of someone, because sometimes that can be an anxiety, or this is still a way you can continue caring for yourself during these times.
Right. I've actually had quite a few patients who were out of town who would do that. And it helped them greatly. Like they would FaceTime or whatever with a parent or sibling, and they would, like while they're cooking or eating dinner, and they would, socialize, or it might be a friend. Now, again, that's a distraction too, but
Sure.
it's also a really great way to help make sure you're compliant and just you're making sure you're eating and you're doing the things that you're supposed to do. So
Yeah.
I love that idea. I think it's a great idea, even though there's some
Mhm.
distraction that can be involved in there too.
Right. And another thing about, people being in isolation or alone, it's also an opportunity to also recognize that we're never actually alone.
Right.
We have ourselves and we're all connected to something higher than ourselves too. I mean, whether that's our beliefs or
Right. 100%.
right. And that we are all connected as humanity as well. So if you're feeling something, chances are there are a million other people that are feeling the same thing.
Oh
Um,
yeah. 100%.
so we are really all in this together in all of the feelings that go with it. And so how can we call in better feelings for ourselves? Because that is what we can control. We can control how
Right.
we choose to feel at any moment. We can control
And
to still live with fear and walk through it,
yeah.
feeling something more. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, 100%. I
Hmm.
just hope people, especially those that struggle with eating stuff, um, don't don't take that opportunity to give in to the disorder and end up in a bad place, because it's
Right,
not worth it. Like
right,
we don't need to punish our bodies, like our
right,
bodies are helpful to us. And
right, right.
so
Exactly. And I think your wording's great with that as far as not giving in to the disorder. And again, finding that personal power and standing in it. Hmm.
right.
And
And
doing,
if you have a friend or family member that you're looking out for, and you notice these things happening, tell
mhm.
them that there are people that can support them.
That's right.
There are people out there
Yeah. Yeah.
that specialize in this stuff, or whatever. There's resources is what I'm
There's
trying to
so
say.
many people out there for you guys. So reach out. And once again, signing off.
Thanks
See
everyone.
you all.